Hello, welcome to SocTalk with JNAB and the Sundance Kid. We are going to explore the frontiers of technology, art, and the human experience. Hello, welcome to SocTalk, episode number I don't know.
Welcome to SocTalk.
Welcome to SocTalk. Sorry we've been away for a while. We were doing other things and got busy and managed to get out of sync and out of schedule. But now we are back. We'll be away for a month on holiday, but we are back.
We are back.
A special summer episode. And today we've got a fun topic, which is going to be conspiracy theories. And why? Because they're fun to talk about. Okay, so first I thought it would be wise to just start with definitions and know what we're talking about here.
Good
so let's start with theory. What is theory? Firstly, so the Oxford definition of theory is a formal set of ideas that is intended to explain why something happens or exists. According to the theory of relativity, nothing can travel faster than light. The debate is centered around two conflicting theories. I'm not sure about that last bit. I'm not sure where that came from. I think that's just used. Yeah. Sorry. So I've just pasted in here and forgot that those two next sentences were the example of the word being used, because I wanted to get specifically what the Oxford definition says. But explaining why something happens or exists. And people quite often say, oh, things are just a theory, just a theory. For example, people will argue climate change is just a theory or evolution is just a theory. But John, as a distinguished scientist, maybe you can explain why theory is actually important. And
Sure. Let me start by going back to one of the two examples you just gave.
Yeah.
Evolution is not a theory. Darwin's theory is about the way that evolution happens. So his theory, as published originally and as modified extensively for the second and third editions, his theory was about the mechanism that allows evolution to happen. Evolution is well known. We see it in gut bacteria. We saw it in how COVID changed over time. Every chicken farmer knows about evolution because they raise chickens to either be good for meat or good for laying eggs. Or maybe, I don't know, good at composing crowdsourced answers for ChatGPT. But they breed them towards specific purposes. And they become increasingly different as they're especially bred.
Yes.
So that is the difference between evolution as a theory and a theory about how evolution happens.
Evolution by natural selection.
Exactly. And specifically the mechanisms of natural selection that enabled evolution. Mm-hmm. His theory made room for people to have an understanding of genetics because genetics didn't exist as a field before. Yeah. Now, sorry, I got really
we're going on tangents already.
Yeah, I'm sorry.
On our definitions.
Darwinism and evolution, man, that's my wheelhouse. So a theory tends to be something that you can prove or disprove. Yes. It's not just a belief. Yeah. It has to be something that's provable or disprovable. Ideally disprovable if you want to be a 21st century scientist. When we talk about a generally accepted theory or a theory that is new, so some people will say climate change is just a theory. We don't have enough evidence yet. You don't need evidence for a theory, right? You just need to see that to you it accounts for some of the behaviors that you're trying to explain. So people have theories about, looking in the monitor there, people have theories about hair loss. What causes it, whether it's genetic, which side of the family it always comes from, and stuff like that. Lots of theories. Yeah. Not so much evidence. That doesn't mean that there's a conspiracy theory about hair loss, though. It just means that there's lots of theories about it.
Yeah. And having your theory be disprovable is a key factor here. For example, if we're using evolution, let's say, it's very easy to disprove if objective reality allowed for it, which would be, I forget who said it, but a rabbit fossil in a Precambrian line, would immediately disprove a lot of our, it wouldn't immediately disprove it, but it would challenge a lot of our assumptions. So that's a key point of making your theories solid.
An example from my first book that I use in every class I teach. Sorry, those of you taking my classes after watching this. Spoiler. I like to hold a pencil up in the air. I can do it with something else that isn't too fragile, say a name badge. And before speaking it all to the students, let it fall to the ground. If it falls every time I do that, that doesn't prove anything.
Yeah.
But if just once it fails to fall, that disproves the idea of a universal gravitational system that works the way we think it does. If just once it falls slowly or goes off sideways, right, that's a challenge to that theory. It means that theory doesn't explain everything anymore.
Yeah, it's a challenge to the theory, but doesn't immediately disprove it, because you need the larger the claim, the more evidence you need.
Yes,
it could be that you're in some weird rotational device, or you're in one of those.
Right.
You're in one of those gravity testing things, or a carnival where there's that's spinning around and you drop it and it flies off to the side.
Right. In which case, my local observation will not be the same as the observations of those universally, and it becomes a proof of Einstein's theorem of relativity instead of gravity.
Yes.
Which is also cool. Trying to disprove theory is really weird. And it's not very complex, but it's just a little bit more complex than most people realize. And so we have a whole lot of folks who think that they've disproven established theory because they've noticed something. Right? I had a lovely conversation a couple of months ago on the train in Germany with a conductor who asked me, so, is the world round or flat? And he really wanted to let me know that he was in on some specialist knowledge that he could share with me. And so I said, well, it's not really either. It's sort of egg-shaped, but because of gravitational pull, right? But he wanted to share with me that the Earth was flat, and so we discussed a couple of ancient world proofs so that it isn't. Mm-hmm.
So before we get into specific, let's continue with establishing our definitions. So the next word to get off here is conspiracy. What do we mean by conspiracy? Now, the Oxford definition here I have is a secret plan by a group to do something unlawful or harmful. And then used in a sentence, the action of plotting or conspiring. That's what we mean here by conspiracy.
I think it's important to stress the fact that people don't always mean unlawful or harmful when they say conspiracy. So folks will say that they conspired to arrange a surprise birthday party. Right? But
which is more, I guess it's also a bit poetic to say it that way, because it's like cheeky.
Exactly, and that's the thing. English is a language full of poetical, metaphorical use of standard terms. So it's hard for us to separate that when we're trying to be specific about definitions. Certainly, conspiracy is a crime in North America. Just the act of conspiring is a crime, regardless of what you're conspiring to do. That's one of the many charges that Donald Trump is facing right now, is conspiracy for organizing groups of people to pretend to be electors and take over and replace real votes with false votes. So conspiracy, again, for some reason, hard to explain in a way that everyone understands. And lots of people will tell you that if you have a different definition of conspiracy than they do, it's a conspiracy.
Okay. So then we go into conspiracy theory, a belief that some secret but influential organization is responsible for an event or phenomenon, is what, again, the Oxford definition says. So they sought to account for the attacks in terms of a conspiracy theory. So that leads us into what we're going to talk about today specifically, conspiracy theories. Now, like we say, something can be proven to be more true than unlikely that it wasn't true.
Okay.
Wait, that's a silly way of saying it. There are some conspiracy theories that prove to be true through people admitting it, released documents, etc., etc. So I thought maybe we'll do a 1-for-1.
Nice. Okay.
We'll do a 1-for-1. We'll do one that proved to be true and one that proved a crazy fun one. So starting with some factual ones. The tobacco industry, for a very long time, were pretty much presented with the evidence and knew that there was a serious link between smoking and lung cancer. But a bunch of them conspired to have scientists be paid to argue the inverse, that that's not true. That was before we knew that was exactly what they were doing. That was a conspiracy theory. It was a theory that people were conspiring to do something unlawful or harmful.
Absolutely.
So that's an example of one that is true. Now, this is all, I don't know if I'll get into this now, but this leads to potentially a logical fallacy that you might hear a lot of other, let's say, conspiracy theorists say, well, this happened. Don't you know they conspired to do that? And they can use that as an example.
Right.
But they do things like this. They is always a word that will...
Yes, they is very important in conspiracies.
And they will use that and say, no, don't you know the governments do this all the time? Scientists do this all the time. They can be bought and sold. This happened, but then just because X is true does not mean Y is true.
Absolutely.
They share some structure in that there are a group of people conspiring to have an unlawful outcome, but you still have to engage your brain to question whether it's true or not. Do you want to say anything more on the tobacco companies example?
Well, I think it's a really good example. Certainly when I was growing up, there were the people who believed still that tobacco was good for you because they had been raised on advertisements in magazines and on television, especially once television started. Advertisements where doctors were saying how good tobacco was, and the cigarette companies in particular were advertising the benefits of smoking on radio and television for decades. So yeah, that was active, and one of the things that came out with the Freedom of Information Act in various countries was that all of the tobacco companies knew that this was untrue, and all of them agreed to hide that information, to cover that information up, to present false information, to pay scientists, like you say, not only to appear and make false statements, but to not publish the research that could have been published to expose that. So yeah, fantastic conspiracy theory, which definitely was part of the debate we're having now until all the information came out.
Until the overwhelming evidence was obvious to everybody.
Right. Well, there are still people who disagree.
There you get the occasional fisherman who smoked all his life, and people will say, oh, he's got fresh air all his life, but then you're counting, it's an example of counting the hits and not the misses.
I was talking with a musician last week, a musician who's been a pro since the 1960s, who told me that he, a heavy smoker all his life, believes that it's the cigarettes that kept him healthy during the pandemic, and that they continue to protect him during the cold and flu season, because the warm air in his lungs is cloudy enough with poisons that it kills any bacteria that try to thrive there. But that's not a conspiracy theory, or that's not a theory that I will try to disprove, because if it's working for him, I'd like it to continue working for him. Sure.
And it's not a conspiracy because he's not conspiring anything.
Yes. If he were trying to convince others to change their smoking behaviors, maybe. But no, you're right. It's not a conspiracy at all. It's just a very strange theory that would be very hard to disprove, especially when it's one person talking to one person. And that's one of the challenges of conspiracy theories is if you want someone to understand that it's maybe not true, how do you go about showing them that?
Yes. So I've got some specific structural tools to do that.
Excellent.
But let's go to some of the fun ones. So starting off, big one of my favorite, interesting, fun ones, but to me, obviously nonsense. The moon landing was a hoax. So this is a conspiracy theory that claims that the Apollo moon landings were staged by NASA, possibly directed by Kubrick, and believers argue that the entire event was filmed in a studio to assert U.S. dominance during the Cold War.
Fantastic.
And why do they believe this? Some inconsistencies with moon landing footage, such as the American flag not appearing to wave. This is their arguments. The belief that government cover-ups and mistrust in authority. This is a big one with a lot of them. Is just general mistrust with the government. They always lie. They're all liars. Politicians are all liars.
And not just with the government, but with any experts.
Yeah. And the fact that 2001: A Space Odyssey existed, and look how good all that special effects were. Of course he could do it. Another one I see argued quite often is, oh, look, there's no stars in the sky.
My favorite argument that I've heard from people who believe it was fake and thought they were really proving the point well was that when you see Armstrong stepping out of the module to take the first ever human steps on the moon, who filmed it?
Yeah.
Well, if Kubrick were directing it, they would
They would have got a better shot.
Would have gotten a better shot, and there wouldn't have been a flub on the lines. and
Yeah.
the camera would have been definitely
so
not visible to us or suspected by us unless they wanted it to be.
Exactly. And the way I wanted to do this is when we start off with these is we'll try steel man them, and we'll make all the arguments for the theory and do the try give them as much cuppings as they deserve.
Great. Do you want to just quickly explain steel man?
Steel manning. So steel manning is the position where I find it fantastically useful. When you're in a debate or argument with another person, it's to make their case for them as best and honestly as you possibly can. Two major good reasons for it. One is empathy. It means you actually have to take on their position. And two, it shows that you're, well, okay, I forget my numbers, but it shows that you're being honest and genuine and that you do have an understanding of their position. But another big reason is that empathy factor, because to make an argument for someone, you have to embody that argument, and then it's more empathetic between two people, and you know that the other person is critiquing things in good faith. A lot of people lose that sometimes.
I agree. I think a great step towards good faith, and we want that in our arguments, right? As mature human beings, we want to be able to recover from an argument and still have a relationship.
Yeah.
One of the things you don't learn online that you do learn in human interaction. So yeah, it's great to, if you had a point you wanted to make and you thought I disagreed with it, it would be great for me to be encouraging you to go further. Oh, so you mean this? Well, let me understand that. Like, could you explain that? This much or that much?
Yeah.
Right? And by getting you to help me make the argument as strong as possible, to help me make your argument as strong as possible. Steel manning is just...
Yeah. And the phrase comes from the inverse of straw manning, which is a tactic to, not in good faith, put up point of their argument that's not at taking the weakest point of their argument, stepping it up and saying, you believe this, you believe that, well, look how silly it is because X, Y, Z. And that's putting up a straw man to easily knock down. Whereas steel manning is building up the best possible case of their argument, which is harder to knock down.
Lovely.
Where the phrase specifically comes from.
Now everybody knows, and we can carry on.
Yes. So to continue steel manning, the moon landing conspiracy, another one argument that people will make is inconsistencies with shadow lines. They see that some of the angles of the shadows aren't in the same direction, but if the sun was the only directional light, all its light is parallel, there shouldn't be different angles and shadows. And another argument that they'll make is they expect that that shadows should be completely black. There shouldn't be lighting them up because you would need an atmosphere to light things up. Our sky lights up, the atmosphere lights up things and gives a lot of global illumination, ambient light. And there's no atmosphere on the moon, so then how come around Neil Armstrong you can see shadows lit up a bit? Wow. So that's another argument.
You've gone further into this than I have ever heard before.
I've argued with people before and had to dismantle all of these before. So let's go through some of these claims one by one and why they probably aren't true. Firstly, there's overwhelming evidence that it did happen. You don't build a big rocket like that to go nowhere. I think Neil deGrasse Tyson made that argument. If you know basic rocket science, you can look at it and see they have enough fuel. Like, where are they going? A counter to that is they say, well, they did go. Some people concede that, yes, they went in the rocket, they took off, but they just went right in orbit and came back down.
That was a prior mission.
Yeah. And one of their other arguments they make is you can't possibly go to the moon because of the radiation.
Oh, good Lord!
So that's one of the arguments that they make. So, firstly, it's not rocket science. It's literally rocket science. It was a complete feat of human civilization to do it. But if you do understand everything, it's certainly not impossible. Yes, it's very, very hard to do, but it's very possible to do.
People have been doing the math for it for more than a century.
Yeah.
And doing the math accurately and precisely for nearly a century.
Mm-hmm. So to go for some of the other claims, one, we have lots of photographs, so they counter those photographs are a studio. Where are the stars, some people say. An easy argument against that is go out with your phone camera at night, take a picture of someone. Where are the stars? It's exactly the same principle. It's just exposure. Stars we see them all the time. Our eyes and brains are the best cameras that we have. Let's say, I'm just sure we could argue, but they're fantastic. There's a lot of neural processing that goes on that adjusts for a lot of things, and we perceive stars quite easily at night and still see everything else, whereas that's actually very, very hard to do with a camera. The reason is just exposure. The stars are actually very, very dim compared to a street light, for say, like orders of magnitude different in luminosity. So just simple basic camera physics, if you need to set your exposure through your aperture and your sensitivity, your ISO, and when those are calibrated to take a nice exposed image of something lit by something, say the sun, because it's still the sun on the moon, it's daytime where they are in taking those photos, that is bright daylight, and those cameras are exposed perfectly for that light. You're not going to see anything in the night sky. It's going to be completely dark. So that's the easy reason of where are the stars. That was, I remember who questioned that, where I first heard that question. That was me, actually, when I was a kid. I remember when I was a kid, I was like, but where are the stars? Just asking genuinely, like, why can't you see the stars? Because every illustration you would see, people would draw it where you would see it and you'd see the stars, because you have a beautiful night sky and the galaxy and all the space imagery. All of the space imagery would show the moon's surface and the stars.
Because they are there.
Yeah.
It's just that a camera can't capture.
Exactly.
Yeah, with you 100% there.
Uh-huh. The other is the shadows not being perfectly dark. So light bounces off of things, essentially. That's the answer. It is called global illumination. It's when, especially when you're walking around in a big, perfectly reflective spacesuit that is literally designed to reflect all of the sunlight and everything off, it lights up everything. It's if you ever bring, say, or if you've ever played with camera reflectors, the big bounce reflectors, if you just drop a reflector and it can flood a room with light just by bouncing light. And it's exactly the same case. The moon's surface as well bounces off a lot of light. We know this. Go out in a full moon. You can see by a full moon. The full moon is very, very far away. That light is also on the surface of the moon a little bit. Now, sure, a lot of it's going out, but some of it will bounce onto shadows.
Sure. And the ship itself.
And the ship itself.
Reflective. And the most reflective thing seen from the surface of the moon is the Earth.
Yep. And, of course, the Earth light.
The sun's light bouncing off of the Earth shines on the moon and adds to that refractive cloud.
Yeah, that's another thing. Earth light, because you would be able to be in nighttime on the moon and see by Earth light.
Yes.
It's cool.
Yeah.
I don't know if they've ever done that because they needed to do all their operations in day, but that would be cool, being on the moon and seeing it all lit up by Earth light. How long were there?
That's what the pale blue dot photo is, right?
No, that was actually the Cassini probe around Saturn.
But that's what that is, though, right? That's
it's just a little tiny dot. Yeah, and it's
Earth's light.
Yeah.
The size of it is too small to be counted in numbers of pixels.
Yeah.
But the brightness of it is enough to stand out against the space.
Yeah.
So there obviously is a lot of reflection going on.
Yeah. That's and there's also the famous Earthrise image.
Yes, by what's his name? Oh gosh, that's horrible. Oh well, there was an American astronaut who took the photo Earthrise.
I could be completely wrong. I want to say it was. No, I'm not gonna. Okay.
Could you look for that?
Real-time fact-checking.
Earthrise photo from the moon.
Yeah, who took it, which astronaut, and who was it? Okay, so we're getting all these. Okay, and you say the camera, who filmed it? They just had a camera on the outside of the spacecraft.
Yeah, I mean, obviously, like you would.
You attach a camera. Like if you ever watch YouTube, let's say, and you watch people go boating. Hey, how's that solo yachtist getting all his shots? Because he attached a camera to his mast.
Exactly, and
it was taken by Willem Anders.
Thank you.
Okay, there we go.
Thank you very much.
Willem Anders.
Yes.
Appreciate it.
There we go.
If you're backing up a vehicle, then you like to have a view. And lately we all have those on our cars and trucks, a camera in the back to say how close you're getting. And if you were trying to land a freaking lunar module on the moon for the first time with human passengers, you'd want a camera looking around.
Yeah.
Right? Maybe more than one.
I'm not sure if they use cameras for landing.
Neither am I, but
I don't think they did. It was all scopes.
Was
They didn't have a camera.
Damn it, let's cut that because it makes me sound stupid. Let's not cut that because it makes me sound stupid.
Because it would be too hard for them to do real-time feeds back then. It was a camera that would transmit back home, but it wouldn't be of high fidelity for
fair
landing.
point, yeah.
I think, as far as I'm aware, because I can,
No, you're absolutely right.
I've got a mental image of the Apollo landing, the Apollo lander controls, and it's all just dials and
analog.
Analog, like telling you how close you are to the surface, and a window and one little window, which then there's a whole fun story of the first moon landing. Neil Armstrong coming in. Going by dials and like, all right, we're about to go. We're into our planned landing section. He sticks his head up to look out the window and is like, it's just rocks, spiky rocks. They have 20 seconds of fuel left, and he decides to manually fly it and land to somewhere else that's a bit smoother. Like 20 seconds of fuel left.
That's the difference between Neil Armstrong and every human now functioning on planet Earth.
I feel like I might have even said that on this podcast.
I believe you did. But it's okay for people to hear about Neil Armstrong again.
Yes.
And the other astronauts too. Exceptional men and women.
So, regardless of the countless photographs, film, moon rocks, like
live witnesses.
Also, they left. One of the other things they did on the Apollo. It was Apollo 11 that was first. The Apollo 11 mission was they left a reflective mirror on the surface of the moon, which they still use today to measure the distance between the Earth and the moon. They shine a laser from the Earth directly to this little reflective mirror that they left on the surface to measure the distance, just by timing how long that beam of light takes to get there and back, which is, I want to say it would be about 2 seconds. I think the moon is 1 light second away. So 2 seconds for it to come back, roughly.
Lovely.
I want to say that. I'm not sure how true that is.
Go ahead and say it. It's a great measure.
I believe it's about 2 seconds to go there and back. Light seconds.
If the moon happens to be 1 light second away, that's just a lovely, lovely number.
It's about that. Oh, here's other. It's not a conspiracy theory, but people will use it to say that somehow the Earth and the solar system is divine. The fact that the moon is almost coincidentally the same diameter in the sky as the sun, which is crazy coincidence, because it literally is a crazy coincidence. There's no other planet in the solar system whose moon will perfectly have the same diameter as the sun.
Really?
When it eclipses, and the Earth is just randomly. We're lucky to have a moon that is almost perfectly the same diameter as the sun. So that's why we get beautiful eclipses where we can see the corona.
The corona of the sun, right? But if it was just a little bit bigger, then people wouldn't go blind.
Yeah, had to.
So maybe we're just perfectly unlucky.
Maybe. Okay, so anything more? I don't know how well we've debunked the moon landing hopes. It's hard to do it because these are the things with a lot of conspiracy theories. Is that, like we said, to be able to counteract them, we should be able to posit things that disprove their theory, their conspiracy theory. They're positing that the U.S. government, NASA, hoaxed all this for the Cold War, and that they couldn't possibly do it.
I might try a different approach.
Yeah.
I don't think you have to disprove anything to debunk a conspiracy theory or any other theory. Yeah. All you have to do is show that there's something that their theory doesn't cover.
Yeah. Also, the onus is on them.
Yes, and that's an important thing. Conspiracy theorists or other theorists as well, including scientific theorists, often say, this is my theory, prove me wrong.
Yeah.
And that's not how it works. If your theory covers everything, that's great. If your theory doesn't cover everything, then it's up to you to change your theory or find out what's wrong about the assumptions that others are making.
So one of the problems is when you speak to a lot of these people is they have an answer for everything. And you can get, it's much easier to throw out a wild claim than to correct it. And a lot of these arguments end up being throwing out more and more and more and more wild claims, and you're constantly, it takes longer to do the work.
Right. right? Which is why you shouldn't have to do that.
Yeah.
Right? It's not a question of you keep changing your claims and I'll keep having to deal with them. It's a question of, let me give you some things that your theory doesn't cover, and then you come back to me when your theory covers them.
Yeah. Yeah.
Right? Don't just pull some other things out of left field. Darwin's theory didn't become controversial and popular. And I should say just about universally popular among scientists. There are very few scientists in the world who don't support it now. It didn't get to be that way because he kept changing it. Right? He took so many years to formulate it and write it because he wanted to have a theory that would stand.
Yeah.
And that's what these conspiracy theorists should do. If you want to argue that the moon landing didn't happen, then find out every single piece of evidence there is that says it did, and debunk it all.
Yes, and the problem is, some people do actually put on the work, and some of these people are the most dangerous people because they're not completely unintelligent, but they are not rigorous and don't understand bias as well as they should. And not understanding that bias means that they can count the hits. You count all the things that help give evidence to your theory and ignore or not fully discuss or present the things that counter that.
Well, that's why I mentioned that being a scientist in the 21st century means disproving your own theory, right? That's what we're all supposed to be doing. That's why we publish scientific work, is to say, here's my best attempt to explain something or to reproduce something or to argue about something. I'm publishing it so that people as smart or smarter than me, as knowledgeable or more knowledgeable than me, singly or in groups, can prove me wrong. That's the scientific theory. Prove me wrong. Not as a challenge like a certain comedian on The Daily Show arguing with strangers on the street, prove me wrong by taking a ridiculous position. But sensibly and reasonably saying, I hope you can prove me wrong because then we all know more. Right? And it's very hard to find a conspiracy theorist who will, in good faith, accept that.
Yes, and they will do a lot of dodgy debating tactics. So you could end up catching yourself in an argument with one of these people, and then they might throw out something like say, oh, but didn't you know this very specific thing actually happened, and that is evidence for me. And then you might not actually know that thing happened, but that one element might be true. And they go, oh, you know nothing because you didn't know that one thing. Right. Therefore, everything you say is discounted, and all of my claims are raised. Again,
a standard debate tactic amongst those who don't actually debate, but are just trying to win arguments, right? It's that internet version of debating. I'm slowing down too much. Let's cut this bit out.
No, it's all right. We're not cutting anymore.
All right.
We're completely honest in our thumblings now.
Excellent.
This is the speed of normal human thought.
Right on. The thing about conspiracy theorists trying to turn everything into an argument is that the way that they argue gives that away. There's a thing that I teach to my students here at RGU, and that I've been teaching to other people for years. If you become emotionally upset in an intellectual discussion, it's because your opinion is emotionally based, not intellectually based. So you'll see that sometimes in talking with conspiracy theorists. They'll start to laugh for no particular reason, but they start laughing. Yeah. Or they start getting really red-faced and angry. It's important that you don't reciprocate. Yeah. It's important that you stay rational. And just remember that when they are leaving rationality behind, it's because the things they're trying to justify were not derived rationally.
And it's also important to understand that because it will happen in yourself too. Yeah. We will all get tied up to everything we believe. And it's important to be self-aware enough to recognize and catch yourself when that's happening. Absolutely. I notice that a lot. It happens to me. I'll be in a discussion and I'll catch myself going a bit too heated, and I'm like, hold on, what's actually going on here? What's actually my problem? Oh, half of the time it's just because someone's disagreeing with me. I don't like that. and then I catch myself bunkering down and taking a position that I don't actually care that much about, just to be combative.
Well, it's a funny thing. The part of our brain that does quick reactions to patterns that we recognize or patterns that we recognize as broken, right? The part of our brain that does that is so much faster than the intellectual part of our brain that we end up forming strong opinions before we've been able to think about them rationally. And then we use all of our rational ability to defend that strong emotionally derived opinion.
Yeah.
So the opinion itself is based in emotion. It's not based in rationality. That's sort of the structure behind what I was saying. But that's also why all of us have that. Because we all allow ourselves to form opinions quickly, rather than saying, I have observed that, and I will wait and think about it.
And it makes sense in terms of evolutionary baggage, because it seems that is, for survival, probably a better stance to take. If you're in small tribal societies, say when hundreds of thousands of years ago, if a neighboring tribe comes up, it's better to make quick decisions rather than waiting out until.
Let's go 20 million years further back and say when your little mouse-sized creatures living in the trees, if there's a pattern on the branch that's sudden, a sudden change in the pattern of noise or movement on the branch, you've got to be able to react to it before you have the time to stop and say, hey, Fred, is that you? Right? The mouse-sized human who said, hey, Fred, is that you, didn't have children, or at least not after that. There's some really cool evolutionary mechanisms in the body that are related to that need, that sort of provide extra evidence for that. There's a response to visual stimulus. Most of the time, the things we see feed back to the optical centers in our brain, right? There are responses to the visual stimulus that feed directly into the spinal cord. So if a certain kind of movement happens in your view, you fall to the ground. Your body is ducking. Doesn't matter what else is going on. Your body is ducking. Your eyes have not told your brain what it is yet. They've just told your spine to get the hell out of the way. Right? That's an ancient reflex. That's So anyway, that's just some evidence for what you were saying.
And cats have that times 100. Try scare a cat. Well, you can scare a cat, but try catch a cat when it's not trying to be caught. Okay. The heating is being turned on in this room for no reason on a summer's day.
Why this is clicking?
Yeah, that's a heater clicking, but it's also going much toastier in here.
I just assumed it was you.
We'll continue. We'll continue. So let's go for another fun, a true example of a.
Can I put one up?
Yes, please.
Okay, I know you.
No, please.
Okay, so starting with the true conspiracy theory or with the false conspiracy
We'll go for
theory?
another true one. We'll do one for one.
Okay, so another true one that only came out pretty recently was in the 60s and early 70s. There was a conspiracy theory, largely argued as a conspiracy theory in the press and in the general population, that the FBI was targeting black activists in the United States and around the world. That there was an open fear of the organization of counter-racist action to use violence if necessary, but peaceful means primarily, to achieve racial equality across the Western and Northern worlds.
Right.
And there was a whole lot of activism going on around the world at that time. They talked about it. They were laughed at. They were laughed at in the press, on television, and popular media, and university lecture halls. The idea that these government agencies would involve themselves in conspiratorial behavior to sabotage these groups rather than just dealing with them directly on the up and up. Well, it's come out quite recently that in fact that was going on. That they used paid informant, that they used blackmailed informants, that they tried to entrap people with sex, with drugs, with other things, and it went on for decades of individually targeting leaders or potential leaders in the civil rights movement to try to destroy their reputation and their lives. Just to an astounding degree, an incredible amount of cooperation across police forces statewide, locally, countrywide, and internationally to work together specifically to do something racist and classist.
And then, so that was a conspiracy for a long time, but now recently
it's become
declassified.
All of a sudden, and one person confessed on his deathbed that he had been one of the people involved in that. his role in the movement had been actually for the FBI. So that's one of my favorites because most of my lifetime, I believed that it was probably true that some of it was going on, but I couldn't believe it was that bad. Because how would you get all the police forces to cooperate with such a blatantly racist and classist agenda? And they did.
Yeah, that's a horrible one, but then also dangerous because that gives evidence to other people who might say, because one of the counter arguments is how many people need to be involved in a conspiracy, and then if it's a lot, then it's much harder to keep it as a conspiracy because humans talk. So that's a dangerous one for people to now point to and say, yeah, but look.
Yeah, that's the unfortunate thing about conspiracy theories is that there are conspiracies. It recently came into the news as an accepted fact rather than an ongoing conspiracy theory that there are gangs among the police forces in Southern California. And it's suspected that this is true elsewhere, but none of them will talk about it. But this is somewhere between dozens and thousands of people keeping secrets of huge conspiracies to take law into their own hands while wearing a badge. And I hate the fact that this has now been shown to be true because so many extrajudicial behaviors are based on the assumption that the police won't be fair to you. Now it ends up that a small percentage of the police won't be in some places. To be clear, I have friends who are police. I have friends who are anti-police activists. I've just recently had the chance to stand side by side with an American police officer and an American ex-military officer in dealing with an emergency locally here in Aberdeen, where something happened and three of us ran to try to take care of it. And it ended up later that one of these folks was a police officer, another one was a retired military. And they were fantastic. They were absolutely fantastic, 100% dedicated to seeing this through and helping this individual, regardless of what it did to their schedule, to their families, to anything else. So I'm not at all trying to say that cops are bad.
No.
That's far from what I'm saying.
It's a case of you can look at anywhere humans do things, any institution, any sufficiently large enough group of people doing any specific type of thing. Whenever there's large enough communities, there's always going to be a percentage of bad humans.
Yeah, a percentage of us will be bad no matter what. There are students who cheat. There are lecturers who cheat.
Yeah.
This happens.
There are scientists who lie.
Yeah.
That's not to say then, because there are scientists who lie or there are cops who are bad, that the whole institution that they're based on is therefore invalid.
Exactly. And that's a weird thing. There's this drive to be reactionary to that. And then say, well, if this piece of it is corrupt, then all of it is corrupt. Yeah. Right? And you can't do that with human systems. No. Right? A bunch of folks tried to cheat in the Canadian election 10, 15 years ago. A bunch of folks tried to cheat in the American election 4 years ago. That doesn't mean you say democracy can't work. Yeah. Right? It means you say democracy is a system designed by humans, implemented by humans, that is extremely complex, and humans can work to disrupt it and corrupt it. So we have to work harder than them to keep it safe. We have to put in subsystems that make it work. Right? And that's what we have to do with policing. That's what we have to do with democracy. It's what we have to do with scientific investigation. Exactly.
And this comes to a big pet peeve of mine is destructivism. So don't know if that's a term, but I'm making it up now. Destructivism attitudes of, yes, you point out flaws in things, but then you try to tear it all down without providing anything else. You have no alternative, and you have no way of helping or doing anything. It's just critiquing rather than constructing. Take something down, or say where all the problems are, but offer solutions, like real, tangible solutions with evidence, not idealized, utopian.
If your ship springs a leak, you don't burn it down, right? You plug the leak.
Yeah, exactly.
Right. There's an old saying in the farming community from when I was a kid that it takes a village of well-minded, skilled, and organized cooperative people to build a barn in a day.
Yeah.
But any jackass can kick it down in an hour.
Exactly. Or here's another way I would also say it. If you're on a boat and you know nothing about boats and you see what you think is a leak, get someone else to look at it, not you. Because that might meant to be there. Maybe you're looking at the back. So let's say you're looking at an engine on the back of the boat and you're like, hey, there's water coming out of the engine. It's leaking. That's a watch your outtake. Leave it alone.
Really
don't plug that one. So yeah, I would even say don't have an understanding of why institutions are there and why they're structured the way they're, because it's not always malevolent. A lot of the time, a lot of our institutions were set up by people better and smarter than you a long time ago that really thought about it, and over time they can become corrupt and leaky, and a ship can become degraded. But the people who designed the ship and built the ship at the ship when it first was launched was a pretty strong, solid, nice ship. And sure, we could upgrade it, we could make it better. But over time, things can deteriorate. Without proper maintenance, anything will deteriorate.
Nicely put. Yeah. I think that applies really well to democracy, and maybe this is a good moment to just talk about that, because we've got an election coming up here.
Got 2 elections, well,
And,
2 elections. The only countries that matter, the United Kingdom and the United States.
So there are elections ongoing everywhere, and there's been a real degradation of participation of the public in elections.
Yeah.
Occasionally an issue comes up and one group comes to the surface and votes a lot. But the general participation in elections is not strong anymore in democracy.
Which is dangerous, because the extremists are always the ones more motivated to do something.
Right. So I'd like to take just a moment and talk about that, because it really relates well with what we're doing. It's another conspiracy theory, right? Folks believe that democracy isn't working because the rich are still in power again and again, or because no matter who you vote for, you've only got a choice of a subset, or whatever your argument is. Like you were saying a minute ago, democracy comes from something that was built a long time ago by people who put a lot of thought and effort into coming up with something that was better than the alternatives presented to them at the time. Democracy is still better than the alternatives we're faced with. So like you said, don't tear it down until you've got something better to replace it. Yeah. I've had a lot of talks lately with very intelligent people, several of them just in the last week, who are saying they don't plan on voting because their vote doesn't count. If you don't vote, then you have no effect in the long term. Yeah. And even if you don't like the short-term effect, think of the long-term effect. Not to espouse politics of one sort or over another, but if you can't vote for someone, then vote against someone else. Yeah. If you can't vote for a party, then vote against a party. And if you can't vote for or against parties, then consider the economy. Yeah. Consider the livelihood of the people around you. Is there a group that was in charge when really bad things happened? And don't just trust whoever says it. Go to the Internet Wayback Machine and take a look at what was really going on over a certain number of years. Take a look. And if it sounds like it takes a bit of effort to inform yourself, yeah.
That is the point.
Yeah, exactly. Anyone can have an opinion, but an informed opinion takes effort. Yeah. Pretending that your opinion is informed is how we get conspiracy theories, right? Really inform yourself. Really find out the facts. If you don't know how to do it, contact Jamie. He'll help. I won't. I'm busy. Just kidding. You can contact me if you want. All 3 of you listening are welcome to contact me. We need to use this system until we have a better one ready to go. And while we are using it and trying to replace it, we have to be sure that other people are using it and trying to replace it. Right now, it's been made very clear in the United States that one of the 2 accepted political parties is planning on putting in fascism when they win. And still people are treating it as though it's an election with a choice. Yeah. Well, the choice is, do you want to have democracy anymore, of any sort, or do you want to move to one-party fascism?
And this is where it's weird. A lot of the attitudes and the arguments sound like the way conspiracy theorists will argue. You'll hear people in the United States now say, look, like you just said, it's clear. If you want to keep democracy, one is pretty much already demonstrated that they're quite willing to walk down autocracy and do everything they can to make it that. And then they'll say, no, it's the other way around.
Yeah.
They'll just say that blindly. And
which, again, uninformed opinions can be expressed. So when somebody says that, treat them as someone who is saying crap until they can give evidence that it isn't crap. I don't mean to laugh at them or be mean to them, but just don't believe them. Don't take them at their word.
Don't believe them. Don't take them at their word. But then this is especially important for democracy as well. Is that concept of steel manning that we said at the start? Your fellow citizens aren't your enemies. If they strongly believe something and are going to vote in a way that might be ill-informed or potentially bad, it's shouting at them, calling them another is only going to further them away from you. You have to understand where they're coming from, why they feel like that, because a lot of the time it's a lot of people, we know a lot of people vote on single issues, and will go for emotion a lot more than anything. So you got to empathize. You got to be able to show your human side as well, because if you're shouting and screaming at them, all you are is someone who shouts and screams, and then you're another piece of evidence for them. Look at them. They are just shouting and screaming.
Exactly. Look how they disrespect me for having a different opinion. No, what you want to do is exactly what you're saying, Jamie, but also take it a step further. And when you're steel manning their argument and helping them to see that you're supporting their argument because you want to understand it, when you're doing that, ask them to quantify things. Because their qualitative assessment of things, this is the worst in the world, right? That's emotionally derived. Ask them to quantify it. Well, what were the numbers that were the worst in the world?
Yeah,
Can we find those somewhere? Let's look at those numbers. No, because if you're right, I want to do that.
I assume you're possibly directly referencing the U.S. presidential debate that recently happened, where Trump was very confidently saying we had the best environmental numbers ever, the best in the world. He said that over and over again. Yeah. I feel sorry for America right now. It's wow, that's your choices.
Well, if I could speak about the debate for a moment, and I wasn't. I've had that same discussion with so many people.
Oh, it's an example of one in an action.
It absolutely is. And if you did happen to see the debate, I'm sorry. But one of the things where the debate failed in a couple of really important ways. One is it was all sound bites. You've got 2 minutes to make an argument, 1 minute to rebut. Yeah. Right? Nothing substantive is going to be said by two 70-something-year-old men in 1 minute. Just nothing. They're not going to be able to do it. And I say that as a 60-something-year-old man. It's just not going to happen. The other thing that failed is that the moderators didn't moderate. Part of the role of the people who run a debate is to make sure that the rules of the debate are followed. And every single time somebody said a measurable, provable lie, they should have been stopped, and there should have been a clear announcement, what this person has just said is not true. Yeah. It may be their opinion. Everyone can have their opinion, but it is not true. Quick graph goes up. There was that great Canadian reporter who was tracking the lies that Donald Trump told in real time 4 or 8 years ago. That's what we need. We need something like that going on every time there's a debate, so that you can just say, okay, you say it was the best environmental numbers ever. Environmental numbers can mean 7 different things. Here they all are. Here they are during your term. At the beginning of your term, what you inherited from the previous person. At the end of your term, what you left for the next. Look, they all go down.
Yeah, and this is where we're in a bit of a pickle as a civilization, where I can already imagine. I have a model of the people we've tried to be speaking to right now. And I'm not sure how accurate my model is of them in their head, but they would just say, that's your numbers.
Yeah, but that's what we have to disprove. Yeah. That's why there has to be somebody on the other side who says that.
The problem is, this is how things end up going to autocracies. You find fewer and fewer and fewer of those people.
Right.
They keep the power, and you find fewer and fewer people to question them. And before you know it, you've got everyone who will... like Trump has been very vocal that all he's looking for is allegiance, and
he's made that very clear.
Yeah.
When he went into power the first time, he was bragging all the time as he was setting up his White House during that period between the election and inauguration. He was setting up his White House to be full of the best people, all the best people. A vast number of the people he appointed who were political cronies to one degree or another, right? They were very happy to work for this man. A huge number of them ended up leaving the office, either fired by him, displaced by him, fired by other cronies or family members, or quitting in anger or disgrace. All of those people should be fact-checking him now. Every single one of them. Bill Barr, who talks extensively about how terrible he was as a president, right, former Attorney General, Bill Barr shouldn't be saying, well, I'm going to vote for him because I vote Republican. Right? That's an anti-democratic idea. I vote for this party because I vote for this party is anti-democratic. And I don't mean against the party of Democrats. I mean it's against the idea of having a democracy.
Yeah, that's
right?
a one-party system that you lead to. That's where you end up at.
Yeah, and Karl Popper, one of my greatest scientific influences, and hopefully everybody's, he's the guy who said you disprove theories instead of proving them, right? Disprove your own theory. Karl Popper said, tolerate everything except intolerance. Right? You cannot tolerate the intolerant. And he used it in discussing Nazism. And that's what Mr. Trump is modeling his ideas after. He famously had one book in his home when the ghostwriter helped him write his autobiography, and that was a biography of Mussolini. And if you watch his posturing when he's talking, the strange lean forward, the holding of the chin, the physical movements, a lot of that comes from Mussolini's speeches. This idea that he has been saying outright, oh, I'll be a fascist on day one. I'll be a dictator on day one. That's a clear message to the electorate. This is not an election about who gets to be president. This is an election about whether or not you get to have another election. Right? The fact that he actively tried to not leave office when he lost the election last time. Right?
Yeah, it's scary.
Yeah, it is. It's very frightening.
Anyway.
Right. So the point is, sometimes a conspiracy theory is true, like the theory about whether or not the election was stolen. There's a theory that says that Joe Biden and his people stole the election, and there's a counter theory that says Mr. Trump and his people tried to steal the election.
Yeah, which is overwhelming evidence over and over and over again.
Exactly. Exactly. One of those theories is not true, obviously. The other theory is obviously true. And it's very telling that Mr. Trump was the one who started they stole the election stuff first. That's what he does all the time. If he's going behind people's back, he accuses them of going behind his back. Look at any of the big, bold statements he makes, and it's always announcing what he himself is doing. You see this a lot with megalomaniacal kinds of people, and he's just a perfect illustration of that. That's a good thing to look out for in talking with conspiracy theorists. If they say to you, yeah, well, you're just saying whatever you have to win the argument, that's probably what they're doing.
Yes. And the other way of doing it is whenever it's another version of that is when people give advice to you. Is we're very best at giving the medicine to other people that we need most.
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay, let's not stay on track. Let's go back onto the path. Let's find another. Let's talk about another wild. We already just did one conspiracy theory there, which.
I thought we did two there, the false one and the real one.
The false one. And let's do another false one. This is a fun one, a bit more lighthearted. It seems we're going into existential civilization worries. Paul McCartney died and was replaced. It's a fun one.
I remember when that was an ongoing battle, thought battle.
This is a theory that claims that Paul McCartney of the Beatles died in a car accident in 1966 and was replaced by a lookalike. Clues to this supposed cover-up are said to be hidden in the music and on the album covers. So one of the famous arguments of this is on the cover of Abbey Road. They're all wearing shoes apart from Paul.
Right.
Obvious proof that he was not alive. It's the guilt of the others, and they made sure that he wouldn't wear shoes. In some of the songs, they quote out lyrics. I forget some of them.
Here's another clue for you all. The walrus was Paul.
Yeah, there we go.
Yeah.
This is the easiest one to disprove. Paul McCartney is alive. It's clearly Paul McCartney. I don't know what else to say. Okay, their argument would be that's the fake person who's for the rest of their life been in place, but
That is the argument.
yeah.
Yeah. And though it seems like a really easy thing to prove, the truth is it's almost impossible to prove.
Yes.
Because of the way record keeping exists for humans now and in the past. Why can't we say that they just replaced all of his ID, his fingerprints, everything else, with the new guy's stuff?
Yes, and there's also the point that just because it's again with the disprovable aspect of things. If you can just postulate anything you want, and because it's almost impossible to prove, or you make it impossible to disprove, like there's actually a being that lives behind your head. Everyone has one. It would be possible for you to see it directly if it was in front of your head, but you can't because it's directly behind your head, and no one can see anyone else's ones. And also, they don't work in mirrors.
Lovely. Yeah.
It's always there.
Prove that wrong.
Prove it wrong.
Yeah. So the way you do that, or the argument about McCartney, is there are a couple of things that can do some of the work for you. Right. One is Occam's razor.
Yes. This was going to be into when we go into the tools, but let's get into the tools now.
All right.
Yeah.
Sorry about that.
No, that's good. Let's keep it structured. So this is a structure. This is a structure now. Let's go into some of the tools.
Sorry. So often, not always, a simple, clear explanation is more likely than a complicated explanation, right? And okay, so there was a massive conspiracy to change Paul McCartney's identity to be that of an unknown. It's a whole lot of work to accomplish what? What is the return for that?
Yes.
Right? And another technique to use is just what does it benefit? Right? So who's going to win from that? The Beatles get to still release albums. The Rolling Stones still released albums after their lead singer died.
Yeah. So this is, and then so if I was taking the position of, say, someone who believed this, this is when you have to watch out. If the other person is very quickly plugging holes on their toes all the time, then you're. This is exactly what happens. Look out for it specifically. You have someone who's well understands whatever the topic is, and then the other person is always plugging at holes and saying, yeah, but then this could have been, or that could have been, that could have been.
Either plugging holes or poking holes in something else, so you'll pay attention to the holes over there.
Yeah. Always quickly on their toes, coming up with things on their feet. And you can do that with anything. So my theory about a being behind the back of your head, try, just give me some things, and I'll play.
Okay, sure. Well, don't you think that somebody would have found a way to measure it?
How would you measure it?
Well, how would you know it exists
It's not
if you
physical.
can't?
It's not physical. It's there, but this is why we can do this. Your hands can pass through it because it's a different phase of matter.
Different phase of matter.
Yeah.
Okay, which phase?
It's not the usual phase. It's not this phase.
We could go on.
It's a
I think,
plasma.
for quite a while.
It's a plasma.
Oh, nice. Okay.
You see, so I can keep throwing out random things. And so I could say, yeah, it's a plasma. It's behind you.
Okay. Yeah. I've got no arguments for you. I've got none.
Boom. So that's what happens. You start throwing things out, and that's a problem because you can find yourself getting caught in this little.
Arguing about what it specifically is the nature of a plasma that would allow a hand to pass
And
through.
you've gone so far off, and you're arguing something else that it's hard to stay on the foundational reasons why that's obviously nonsense. Well, or get them to understand it at least.
Yeah, or even that it's possibly nonsense.
Yeah.
And that's another interesting thing is the fact that you can make an argument for something doesn't make it valid.
Yeah.
Right? And we're not taught that anymore. We're not taught about how to think and how to reason anymore. It's very rare to have that taught at any age. And it's really unfortunate because a lot of conspiracy theories will disprove themselves really quickly when subjected to rational thought.
Yes.
The problems that you've been putting up are, what if your rational thought is being confronted by an active person who's thought about all of this more than you have? right? And that is what happens when we're trying to talk someone down. Before you try to talk someone out of a conspiracy theory, maybe the important thing to do is to talk yourself out of it. Mm-hmm. So if you're faced with something that somebody is saying to you, oh, look at this, man, here, look at this, try to always approach it rationally and wondering, using Occam's razor, using that old follow the money sort of routine from the cop shows, right? Who does it benefit if this is true, right? Do your best to intellectually challenge something that would be easy to believe. Not in the process of getting off the bus, but afterwards, when you're wondering if you should have gotten off at that stop or another one.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And respect and the necessity for evidence. So that example that I just gave is one where you might encounter lots of people that there's just not enough evidence. We need evidence. And what is evidence? It's objectively observable.
Well, this is why I said I've got nothing for you. It's because you're talking about something that can't be measured, right? Exactly. It's the old argument of the teapot that's orbiting in our solar system.
That was the example I was going to give, but I wanted to make up a new one on the spot.
Nice. Well, I like that one. Yeah. That's a good one. And I made
measurable. So
I may borrow it from you and use it in class because it's a really good one. Prove it wrong. Well, the answer is prove it right.
Yeah, exactly.
Right? I don't have to prove your idea is wrong. It's like what we were saying 30 minutes ago. You have to prove that there's a reason for this theory to exist. Mm-hmm. So if you have a theory that there's somebody invisible behind your head who you could see if he wasn't behind your head, but nobody else can ever see him.
Yeah.
How do you?
But I have seen him because I asked him to come round once, and I saw him.
And he came around.
He came around, and I saw him with my own eyes.
Oh, okay, great. How did you document that?
I drew a picture. I've got it here.
Yeah, that's not a document of something you saw. That's a document of something you drew.
Tried to take a picture, but it came out blurry.
Yeah, makes sense. Makes sense. That's what happens all the time when I'm having lunch with Bigfoot.
Yeah.
But that's the thing, right? Like, if I try to argue with you every point, then we argue forever, and we both become more convinced that we're right. If I just say to you, but you're not making an argument, right? You can still argue against that, but I won't engage. I didn't engage when you were asking me.
So I was made myself aware of another point of all of this that is true in a lot of cases, and it's not, we're going away a bit from conspiracy theories and go to more paranormal, let's say, or potentially religious. Is that different argument where I just said, no, I saw him once with my own eyes. And let's say a lot of people believe in ghosts. The ghosts aren't really a conspiracy, I guess, because there's no conspiring. But people believe in them. A lot of people believe in them.
Ghosts might be conspiring to keep themselves hidden from most of us.
That's it.
Sorry, ghosts.
Some people can have a genuine experience. That's not to say, therefore, objective reality is in one way. I could literally have... not an objective experience, a subjective experience. I could have a 100% true subjective experience of what I just described. Let's say the man behind my head floated in front of my face and I 100% saw him with my own eyes. I even drew that picture. That could be true. There are weird things that can go on in human brains. We dream every night. It goes weird. So someone could have an experience there. So this is where measurable. This is not the domain of science. This is not where we... I guess some things you do try to measure and whatnot, but through it. But yeah, watch out for claims that aren't measurable in some way. But then okay, so you could try to measure it. It was like, okay, so when does it happen? Every time I say these words in front of a mirror or something. Okay, let's go try that. And then if you try it over and over and over and over and over again, and it doesn't happen, then it's possibly that experience was a once-off and potentially doesn't prove anything.
No, that's right. You don't prove anything by making it happen again, and you don't prove anything by failing to make it happen again. Yeah. Right? What you're proving is that at that moment it wasn't the same as the previous moment, or if it was, then one or the other is being reported incorrectly. Mm-hmm. Right? Parapsychologists try to use quantitative proofs. They try to gather something, right? There's Carillion fields and cold fronts and all kinds of things that they try to use to say
they
you
use
can
like
metricize this.
magnetometers. What are they called? But they use various different devices that are always tuned specifically to be on noise. And yes, when you look at a fuzzy pattern, a fuzzy thing, your human brain will pick out patterns.
Pareidolia, baby.
Yeah.
Yeah. Sorry, no offense intended in saying baby. That was not a diminutive word.
Right. So another tool, seeing as we're on tools, number of people involved is one we alluded to. It's a dangerous thing because you don't want to. There are genuine psychological disorders that people have. Some of these people, schizophrenia being one of them, and that's a very much self-experiential thing. But if you're, let's just ad absurdum, if your conspiracy involves every other human in existence, probably not real.
Yeah, but you'd say that, man. You're in on it.
Yeah, you're in on it. You're in on it. Everyone's in on it.
Yeah, no, that's a really good point. And it would be great if people were rational enough to see that.
Mm-hmm. So a lot of our examples, let's say the moon landing was a hoax. There would need to be a lot of people involved to keep that a secret for so long, when there would be probably financial benefit for releasing the actual information, and being that you can make a great documentary if you had all the evidence, if you're an important part of making all that happen. It would leak eventually because people would have financial incentive to do it.
And now with the Freedom of Information Act, you know that there have been thousands of requests to show, I want to see the real set footage. I want to see the storyboards,
The other tool is Hanlon's razor, which is never attribute to malice, which can be adequately explained by stupidity or incompetence. So a lot of conspiracy theorists will hold two conflicting ideas in their head, which is that one, the government, they are all-powerful, all-seeing, and always out to get you, and can do perfect operations like, say, hoax a moon landing. Yet somehow they'll also argue, they can't even fix the potholes on your street. Right. And they're all stupid and idiots that actively say that.
They're all fools.
Yeah.
But they also manage to fool everyone in the world except me and my 3 friends on Facebook.
Exactly. Quite often, is it more likely that they're just not doing things well? There's a better, there was an author who rephrased it to be a bit better, Douglas Hubbard, which is never attribute to malice or stupidity, which can be explained by moderately rational individuals following incentives in a complex system.
Nice, that's lovely.
Yeah.
Wow,
So
I'd like a copy of that so I can find out more about the source. That's a really good quote.
That's a much better way of putting it. Is it more likely, let's say, your governments their incentives are to stay in power, and yes, they will do some things, but they're probably doing it to stay in power. And some of the times it's not malice or stupidity, it's their incentives.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah, that's a really good quote. I'm going to be stuck on that for a little while.
Mm-hmm. And a lot of examples could be like academic institutions, that there can be bad practice sometimes, but it's not malice. They're not bad people. They're not stupid people. But their incentives are to say, I'm going to be measured on my count of citations, let's say. So they're not malicious, they're not stupid, but they will do things that are maybe dishonest or harmful to get a higher amount.
Right. Yeah. We've all seen examples of that, not just in academia, but in pretty much every field. There, like you were saying before, there will always be a certain number of people who will be unethical about those things. I don't know if that explains enough of the body of it, though.
No, these are just tools to look at. Okay. Yeah. So these are some of the tools. I only wrote down 3, but common sense is another good tool.
Yes, it is.
What we would say is common sense.
Yes.
Questioning just like it comes back to Occam's razor. Just what's more likely? Is Paul McCartney dead and all of these elaborate things had to happen, or is it just a silly theory?
Right. And if you want to look at that one in particular, you can say, well, what would it benefit anyone to come up with or promote a silly theory? And the answer is everybody wanted to be closer to the Beatles than they were, with the possible exception of a few people who were close to the Beatles. So if you could come up with something like that, then you had the inside scoop on the biggest news story in the world. Right? So there was some benefit to making up nonsense about Paul McCartney, just like there is or was benefit to the people who made up nonsense about cures for COVID that weren't sponsored by big pharma, right? Like horse, whatever it was, and bleach, right?
Yes. So those are two good examples of where things get tricky, because this is where those two examples specifically, horse dewormer and bleach, are sometimes used by people to immediately say, oh, you believe that, therefore you're an idiot, and they'll immediately disprove someone. But there was actual context where they could help in specific context. So like the famous ones, Trump obviously paraphrased what he had heard a legitimate medical person say with the bleach one.
Right, but the paraphrasing was, it would be great if we could just go in somehow and clean it out of the system.
Yeah. So
right?
I believe...
But what he said was inject bleach into your blood.
Exactly. But then the problem is people will say, oh no, but it was actually this or that. Therefore, so it's again, just because X is true does not mean Y is true.
But unfortunately, a whole lot of people died in the U.S. injecting themselves with bleach, which will kill you. Right? Like there's not a safe dose.
No.
It's not like, and if there is a dose that doesn't kill you, it's not curing you of disease. Yeah. It's the same thing with the horse dewormer. At the time, there was, the immediate reaction was for people to say that this was nonsense. Then there were people who were coming out and saying, no, it is efficacious in some cases. The numbers have come out now. And in every single case, it reduced your resistance to COVID. So it made you more likely to get that disease in every single case. So the hard numbers of it are completely the opposite of saying there's a balance. There was no balance. It was a nonsensical idea promoted largely by a family that was funding Mr. Trump and that sold that dewormer.
Yeah. Which, there's a conspiracy. There's the actual conspiracy.
Yeah, the actual conspiracy behind the conspiracy theory, making people look the other way.
And that's an interesting one. When a conspiracy theory inverts, so an example would be a lot of the big oil companies, Exxon specifically, knew that in the 60s, early studies knew that releasing more and more CO2 into the atmosphere is going to be catastrophic. And they conspired to have scientists put out a lot of things saying otherwise. So that was a conspiracy back then of probably the actual factual thing that happened. But now you'll hear people saying climate change is a conspiracy. Scientists are conspiring to say it's all it's just a conspiracy against oil and gas because we need our cars. But they'll say it's a conspiracy for promoting all their green infrastructure.
Right, because they're going to make millions.
They're going to make millions, which is like yes, that is a true conspiracy, but it was inverted. It's like you've missed it. And the example you just gave there with the medicine and COVID and whatnot.
Well, it goes back to what I was saying a little while ago, right? If a flim-flam artist is accusing their opponent of something, that's what they're doing. Just trust that that's what they're doing.
Yeah.
So when a television station owned by a company that sells oil starts announcing that green is a conspiracy, just understand that means that oil is a conspiracy. And it's not a proof, but it's a good argument. Take a look over there, right? Look behind the screen. The thing with oil is that it goes to something even worse, even further back. And this is going to sound like a conspiracy theory, but do you know that lead was added to gasoline?
Yeah. Yes, why we have unleaded specifically. It's specifically called unleaded.
But even that, unleaded came about after 2-3 generations of leaded gasoline in response to demand that gas has to be less dangerous and fear that there was going to be some regulation that would stop normal gasoline from being sold. So they started selling unleaded gasoline. Cars had to convert over to dealing with unleaded gasoline. But they still add the lead to the gasoline in the first place. I can't recall right now the name of the man who came up with the idea, but a lot of folks talk about him as being the biggest mass murderer in history. Because he came up with this notion, the companies went for it, and leaded gasoline fumes have caused so much illness and death.
Yeah.
Right? And the fact that the companies that are doing this still aren't stopping that process is astounding. It makes me feel like I'm a conspiracy theorist.
Yeah.
How is it possible that they're doing this and they're not just saying, okay, we're going to stop?
This is a problem. Some conspiracy, some of them are true. Well, we've gone through ones that were conspiracies and then true. Another one, this is a conspiracy theory. I don't know how true it is because it's a conspiracy theory, but here's one I have heard. Russian disinformation against nuclear power in the West, and specifically going to green political parties and pointing out to them, nuclear is horrible and bad, and promoting that. So then you have green political parties saying, we're pro-wind, pro everything, not nuclear, not gasoline. When factually the numbers is that nuclear is still the most safe energy per kilowatt. There's a rate that you can use for this, which is per kilowatt deaths. And nuclear is an order of magnitude safer than everything else.
Yeah, I haven't seen that, but I have my suspicions about whether or not that includes the damage caused in Chernobyl, in 3 Mile Island, and in Fukushima.
I'm pretty sure you can even account for them, and it's still working.
It's possible, because I don't know. So I'm not steel-manning you.
Yeah.
I'm saying that I don't know. But I would like to become more informed, and then I'll steel-man you, and we can go from there. I'll steel-man you, you steel-man me, and we'll see where we end up.
The least in terms of... you can just see silliness happen when you see Germany shut down all of its nuclear power plants to the point where they have an energy crisis and start strip mining coal.
Yeah, it's ridiculous. And the fact that all of the countries that were suddenly getting a huge amount of pressure not to reduce nuclear, not to make nuclear safer, but to stop nuclear right now, we're all dependent on Russia for oil. Right? And again, I sound like a conspiracy theorist.
This is what I mean. This is a conspiracy. When this is also where some of the tools actually do help. Who follow the money? Who would benefit from it? And who has been proven to do such things?
Yeah, absolutely. Same thing with interference in elections around the world. That whole anti-democratic feeling that we were talking about, where people are increasingly becoming convinced that democracy is not the way to get change in the system. Democracy will not allow change in the system. The whole point of democracy is to allow the population to change the system. If you convince the most disenfranchised that it will never do that, then their option is revolution. Right? I have friends in Catalonia who were involved in the protests that led to a horrible stamping down on their civil rights and their freedoms. The issue is extremely complex. But I want to say that in the midst of it all, I had the chance to talk to a few people about the fact that if they were getting support from Russia, they should be mindful that Russia doesn't want them to win. Russia just wants both sides to lose. And I was told in no uncertain terms that the enemy of my enemy is my friend. And I had to explain that that principle doesn't deal with day-to-day life. That's in the middle of a fight. In the middle of the fight, the enemy of your enemy is your friend because they're stopping the punch from landing, or they're punching someone else who is trying to punch you. Right? In that moment of immediate action, that's true. But longer term, over time, no, the enemy of your enemy is the enemy of your enemy. And they may have decided to use you as a weapon. but they will not change their focus to being one of supporting you. Their focus is to be the enemy of your enemy. And again, these are simple thought processes, that tricks that you learn, algorithms of the mind, if you will, that you either learn or you don't. And when you don't learn them, then it's easy for someone who's practiced at them to feed you just enough disinformation to get you to do what they want.
Yes.
Right?
Yes.
Whether it's a conspiracy theorist trying to convince you that it's best not to vote because it's all rigged anyway, or a conspiracy theorist trying to convince you to buy the horse dewormer that their family manufactures, or whether it's a conspiracy theorist trying to convince you that this is actually a podcast being run by some lecturers at a small university in Scotland and not a construct of the big state.
There would be people who would argue such things. Oh, yeah, man, they're just trying to keep the institutions going.
That's it.
Just trying to make me think.
Trying to make me think. Lovely.
I still had a big list of other ones, but we could be here all day. And
Well, we can come back to this. This is a fun topic.
A fun one.
We can do this again.
Let us know if you enjoyed it, and we will absolutely come back to conspiracy theories. I got a big list of other ones we didn't even talk about. Just to throw some of them out there: Hollow Earth, chemtrails, 5G caused COVID, Illuminati controlling the world. Okay, so yes, let's leave with a message of that. Question everything, but don't question it too much that your mind falls out.
Right, and mostly question your own opinions.
Yeah, question your own opinions. Everyone, that goes to us too.
Yeah, that's why we're scientists, so that we get help questioning our opinions, especially the ones we really want to be true.
Exactly. And be nice to each other.
Oh, please.
Be nice to each other. Question everything. Watch out for growing autocracy and authoritarianism around the world. And that's the kind of things to question.
Inshallah.
Cheerio. Toodaloo.
Bye, y'all.
SocTalk is a production from the Robert Gordon University School of Computing.
Today's episode was brought to you by the letter pi and the number pi.